Good morning. We are on day 3 of our build. Yesterday we built all of our rafters that go in the center of our building at our 2-foot mark, our 4-foot mark, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. So we have 7 of them built and ready to go. We will do our gable ends as we get our walls up. You're probably wondering why you have so many pieces left over at this point. We'll get to those. To build our walls, we're going to start with our 2 end walls first and get those stood up. So our top and bottom plates are going to be the full 10 foot long, and we will place our studs every 16 inches in between there. We're going to sheet them and tie-vac them before we stand them up. It makes it easier. That way you're not working on ladders so much. When we get done, we'll do our back wall, and then we will get started on our front wall, which is going to have our roll-up door and a window. So that one's going to take a little bit more math and planning, and so we're going to save the best for last. All right, so when we start laying this out, we're going to start on this wall. So we have 2 2x4x10s, and we've double checked them that they are in fact 10 feet long. Sometimes when you buy sticks, especially when you get into larger dimensions, they're over your dimension by a little bit, but these ones are perfect. We've set them so they're crowned properly. The crown of the board's going down, so it faces into the building. And then also, if the board's waving, how they're standing on end, if they're waving this way, we're making them bow in, so when we stand the wall up, the weight will flatten everything down. We did a good job of picking out the straightest ones we could find though. So to start, we're gonna mark our end stud at 1.5 inches. And then we also are gonna put another one in sideways. And that will make sense. We need a nailer. So we go ahead and mark another one to remind us to put one in. This one will stand this way, and we'll have one that goes this way next to the floor so we can nail our next wall into it. And then we just measure every 16 inches down on center from there. So one cheat that we use to make sure that this is good so we don't have to get our levels out, because a shed is just placed on the ground. So we try our best to get as level as possible. However, it's not perfect, and it likely never will be unless you were to pour like a cement foundation or something. So one thing we do is when we build our wall, we square up the bottom. We square it up with these sides to make sure that your framing is square. And then your sheeting, you just slide into place and make sure that this whole edge is flush and square, along with your other edge. It's flush and square. And as long as you do that, your wall is perfectly square. And if you do that with all 4 walls, when you stand it up, you don't have to get out your levels and make sure that your wall's standing upright. Just always make sure that if everything is flush, it will be square when you're done. All right, so we've gotten our 2 outside walls stood up, and now we need to frame up this wall. So this one gets a little bit tricky because we have to have our studs for our plywood to line up, but our plywood's gonna go all the way to the outside of this board. So when we measure for where our studs go, of course we have to put one right here to nail to this, but we can't put it at the 16 mark. We have to hold it back 3.5 inches. So then that way our 16 is starting from the end of here. So you could either get a clamp and hold your tape measure and then mark your 16s, or you can do the math and figure it out, or you can butt it up, and if you can wiggle your tape measure in here, you know, you can pull from here too. However you want to do it. I prefer just to hold my tape measure off and either have somebody help hold it or clamp it, because then I don't have to put any brain work into it. There's no room for error. Doing the math, there's room for error, and you frame enough buildings and you're bound to screw up eventually, and it's not fun when you do. You have to toenail in studs or accommodate for that. So whatever way works for you, just roll with it, but make sure you get it right, because otherwise sheathing it becomes a real difficult task. All right, so these are our top plates that we're gonna use, the 2x6s. They're 16 feet long, so they stretch the whole wall. It's best if you can have your top plates be as long as possible in any building that you're doing. Even when we build 10 by 20 sheds, we'll even use 20 footers. It just gives you your best strength and the most accuracy. And then we just laid them out every 2 feet on center for our rafters to sit on. That way we don't have to measure when we get up there. When we first set our rafters in place, we run a 3-inch construction screw up through the bottom of the double top plate and in through the bottom of the rafter. And that holds it in place really well. We start on one side and get them all done, and then we move to the back side of the building and we can rock the wall in or out as we need so it's spaced properly.
Okay, so now it's time to toe nail in the rafters. So we can't use the nail gun on this part because we risk splitting the rafter. So we start by hand hammering in the nails, and then we finish with this toy.
Once all of our rafters are set in place, we mark a couple 2x4s for 2 feet on center, and we screw those to our rafters up towards the peak. That allows us to screw on our gable end rafters to it. Holds them all in place. We were able to cut our plywood, staple that on. Once we get that sheeted, then we go ahead and nail on our final pieces for our fascia trim. Things that we really haven't mentioned throughout the build that got brought up yesterday talking to a friend that I really think that we should hit on. One of them is that we use green tree around our door, and then for our bottom plate on this whole side. We are going to put a roll-up door on here, and roll-up doors, you know, it's that steel type door. They're just leaky. That's just the way they are. And so I didn't want this to rot out. So we used green here just as an added protection. The other thing is this board, of course, gets cut out now that everything's stood. We leave it on when we're standing our walls up so everything stays square and true and where it needs to be. But now this gets cut out. You just take a Sawzall and cut on either side. Another thing, come on inside. I was asked, if you look up at our roof, you can see that there's a gap about 2.5 to 3 inches on either side. And I was asked why we do that. And the reason is that when we put our shingles up and over it, if we have that peak go all the way up and then we try to fold the shingle over, we'll crack that shingle. It gets stressed, and over time that will crack and break apart. On a 4/12 pitch, probably not as important, but when you get into 6/12 pitches, those are pretty steep. So we just leave that gap so the shingle just rolls over it nice and easy.